It happened when I rushed to the operating room, seized by panic upon hearing that my husband was in critical condition. Suddenly, a nurse grabbed me. "Hide, trust me," she whispered. I obeyed and concealed myself in an adjoining room. 10 minutes later, the door opened, and what I saw froze my blood. Welcome to Voices of Mama Joe. I share new life stories here every day, and I'd really appreciate it if you hit subscribe and liked my video. Now let's jump back into my story. I'm sure you'll love it if you keep listening till the end. The rain was merciless that night, slamming against the asphalt like a drumbeat of doom as I ran toward my car. I could feel my chest tightening with every step, my lungs screaming for air, my mind spinning with images of Lucas, my Lucas, lying broken and helpless. The phone call had come out of nowhere. "Ma'am, your husband is in critical condition. We're taking him to the operating room immediately." My legs had felt like lead, my fingers numb around the steering wheel, but somehow I managed to start the engine. Rain splashing over my windshield, blurring my vision into a gray smear. Every light, every car, every shadow was a potential threat to the man I loved more than my own life. I tried to call him again, 3 times, each ring stabbing my heart sharper than the last. No answer. Each unanswered ring made the panic rise higher, coiling in my stomach until it became impossible to think. I gripped the steering wheel so tight I thought my knuckles would shatter. "Lord, just let him survive," I prayed aloud, my voice almost drowned by the roar of water and tires on wet roads. The drive, which should have taken 15 minutes, stretched into an eternity. Every red light, every slow-moving vehicle felt like an obstacle deliberately placed to test my sanity. When I finally reached the hospital, the building loomed like a fortress, sterile and indifferent to the storm of fear I carried inside me. I abandoned the car in the parking lot without caring who saw, slipping through the revolving doors soaked and trembling. At the reception, I could barely choke out his name. "My husband, Lucas! He's been in an accident." The nurse looked up calmly, typing something into the computer, her hands steady. She gestured vaguely to an elevator in a wing of the hospital I barely understood. I nodded numbly and sprinted toward it, ignoring the shouts of a security guard who told me to slow down. My mind was a foggy swirl of guilt and terror. Our argument earlier that day, so trivial, so meaningless now, flashed in my memory. I had asked him to reconsider taking that risky contract, to be cautious, to consider me and us before chasing deadlines. He had snapped, telling me I didn't understand his work, that pressure and responsibility were different from worry and fear. If only I had let it go. If only I had kissed him that morning like I always did. Now every word, every moment, every second felt like a dagger in my chest. On the 4th floor, the corridor stretched before me, sterile and unforgiving. The fluorescent lights flickered overhead, casting a pallid glow over the polished linoleum floor. I could hear my own breathing, sharp and ragged, echoing back at me. At the end of the hallway, I saw it. Double doors with a red light above them. Operating room 5. My legs moved on their own, drawn toward the source of all my fear. But just as my hand reached for the cold steel door, a firm grip stopped me. "Don't do it," whispered a voice, low and urgent. I spun around, heart hammering, and saw a young nurse, her blue scrubs pristine, her eyes wide with alarm. You have to hide. It's not safe. They can't know you're here." My mind stuttered. "What are you talking about? My husband, he's in there. I need to see him." "No," she said, her voice trembling but steady. "You cannot go in. It's a trap." A trap. The word felt like ice in my veins. "Trap? Who? What are you talking about?" "I don't have time to explain everything," she hissed, glancing over her shoulder. "Go, now. That room you see across the hall, the one behind the supply closet door. Hide there. Lock it. Whatever you hear, whatever you see, do not make a sound. Do not come out until I get you. Do you understand?" My head was spinning. Lucas. Critical condition, a trap. Hide. All of it collided inside me, but the urgency in her eyes left no room for doubt. I nodded shakily, swallowing my fear, and followed her instructions. She practically shoved me down the short corridor, pointing to the dark wooden door tucked behind a vending machine. I fumbled with the lock, turned the knob, and slid inside. The room was dark and smelled faintly of stale coffee and disinfectant. I pressed my back against the wall, clutching my coat to my chest, trying to breathe without making a sound. My ears strained for any noise from the corridor, from the operating room. The door clicked softly behind me as she left, and I was alone with my terror. Time became a liquid nightmare. Every second stretched into a minute, every minute into an eternity. My thoughts jumped chaotically between the scene that awaited me and the one I had narrowly avoided. What was really happening in there? Why had she saved me? My fingers trembled as I checked the time on my phone. 1 o'clock, 1 hour, 1 minute past the moment my life had tilted into chaos. I dared not imagine what I might see, what horrors could await Lucas. And then, the doors at the end of the hallway opened with a soft hiss. My breath caught. Through the narrow gap between the door and the frame, I could see a figure emerge. Blue scrubs, calm, methodical movements. The man's mask had slipped down, and I recognized him instantly. Dr. Holden Carver, Lucas's personal physician. Lucas trusted him. He had to, but the sight of him did not bring relief. He carried himself like a conductor orchestrating a symphony I could not understand. Behind him was Lucas, alive, moving, strong, fully dressed in scrubs like him, walking with effortless grace as if he had just finished a routine checkup, not fighting for his life on a table. I felt my stomach drop. My legs trembled. The last 10 minutes of terror, the mad drive, the unanswered calls, all of it seemed a cruel, twisted prelude to what I now understood was a lie. And then another figure emerged, a woman. Elegant, tall, hair cascading perfectly down her back. I recognized her immediately. Fiona, Lucas's assistant, the one who always smiled at me with thinly veiled contempt at company events. She looked satisfied, almost triumphant, like she had orchestrated this entire performance. I could hear Lucas's voice, calm and clear, far from weak or injured. "Everything went according to plan," he said smoothly, his tone casual, almost mocking. The nurse, the operating room, the ambulance, all fake. The setup was for me. My heart raced, blood pounding in my ears. My hand shook as I pressed it to my mouth. Betrayal, fear, anger, confusion, all tangled into one choking knot inside me. My mind reeled. I had trusted him. I had loved him. I had followed every word, every instruction, every moment without question, and they had manipulated it all. The nurse outside whispered again, low, urgent, "Mrs. Emery, you must be quiet. They could come back any moment. This is not about Lucas. He's fine. But you are the target. You understand?" I nodded, silent, shaking, my thoughts spinning. She had seen the real chart. She had intercepted the plan. The puzzle pieces were starting to fit. My eyes returned to Lucas, standing strong, oblivious to the terror I had been through. Fiona was smirking, clearly enjoying my distress. Dr. Carver was methodical, calm, untouchable. And what could I do? I had nowhere to go, no leverage, no plan. And yet, a small spark of fury began to rise inside me. They had assumed I was helpless, that I would break, but they didn't know me at all. Not the real me. Not the part of me that refused to surrender to fear. The spark grew, coiling through my chest like wildfire. My hands clenched. I was trembling, yes, but not from fear, from rage, from the cold, hard determination that had begun to replace the panic. I was alive. Lucas was alive. They had underestimated me, and I would not be fooled again. My eyes stayed locked on them. My heart pounded. Adrenaline screaming through every vein. I had survived the drive, the call, the panic, the lie. Now it was time to survive this, and to fight somehow. I whispered to myself, barely audible, "This isn't over, not by a long shot." And in that quiet, tense moment, the hallway remained empty, the red light above operating room 5 glowing, the rain outside pounding against the hospital like a funeral drum. Everything was about to change. I stayed crouched in the dark, my heart hammering like a drum in my chest, watching Lucas and Fiona move with the confidence of people who believed they had already won. The hallway was silent except for the faint hum of the hospital ventilation system and the distant echo of the storm outside. Every step they took felt deliberate, as though I was witnessing a carefully choreographed performance meant to break me. I pressed myself tighter against the wall, my fingers digging into the wooden surface, nails scraping softly, almost a whisper, but enough to make my teeth clench at the sound. The nurse's words repeated in my mind, "Hide, trust me, it's not safe." I didn't know what she had seen, what she knew, but she was right. Every instinct screamed at me that the operating room, the critical patient report, the frantic calls, they had all been a lie. I felt sick, my stomach churning. The idea that Lucas had been in on this, or at least aware enough to let it happen, was unbearable. My hands shook as I replayed everything in my head. The car accident he never had, the urgent phone call, the panic that had gripped me. Every detail had been orchestrated to manipulate me, to control me, and I had fallen for it. But now, hidden in this shadowed room, I realized I had a choice. I could remain a pawn, silent and terrified, or I could find a way to fight back. The spark that had begun inside me moments ago flared into something hotter, sharper, a fire that refused to be smothered by fear. I would not let them control me. My eyes darted around the small storage room, scanning for anything I could use. The supply closet had shelves lined with boxes of gauze, surgical gloves, syringes, and medical instruments. Nothing seemed immediately helpful. I needed leverage, something that could shift the balance. My hands found a small first aid kit tucked in the corner. I tore it open and felt around inside. Bandages, antiseptic wipes, a pair of scissors. Not weapons, but tools. Tools were enough if I was clever. I had to be clever. I had to think 2 steps ahead. My ears caught the faint sound of footsteps approaching again. I froze, barely daring to breathe. The nurse's warning echoed louder now, each syllable a hammer in my head. Do not make a sound. Do not come out until I get you. The door to the closet rattled slightly. Fiona's voice, silky and cruel, floated down the hall. Where did she go, Lucas? She should have been right here. Lucas responded in his usual calm, almost detached tone. She's frightened. She doesn't know what's happening. Let her come to us. She'll understand soon enough. Frightened. The words twisted in my mind like a knife. They thought they were clever, that I was blind to their intentions, but I wasn't. Not anymore. My hands clenched around the scissors. It wasn't about hurting anyone yet. It was about control. About the leverage I could gain if I played this right. I had to wait. Timing was everything. I could hear their voices fading as they moved away, probably back toward the main operating room, or maybe to check the emergency exits. I held my breath until the sounds of movement died down completely, until the corridor was silent once more. Then I slipped out of the supply closet, careful to keep my movements quiet, my heart pounding with a mixture of fear and anticipation. The hallway stretched before me, dimly lit and treacherous. I crept along the wall, moving toward a corner where I could peek without being seen. Lucas was standing by the door of the operating room now, checking a clipboard. Fiona was beside him, speaking softly, leaning close as if whispering secrets only he could hear. They were laughing quietly. Their comfort, their ease, made my stomach twist. They had thought they could manipulate my fear into obedience. They had underestimated the storm inside me. My eyes fell on a small security camera in the corner of the ceiling, blinking faintly with a red light. That was my chance. If I could reach it, if I could manipulate it, maybe I could record their actions, expose the lie, gain the upper hand. I inched forward, silent, careful, like a predator stalking its prey. My mind raced through possibilities. I could pull the camera down physically, but that risked exposure. I could somehow disable it, but I didn't know enough about its system. Or I could pretend I was helpless, a scared woman trapped, and wait for the right moment to turn the tables. Patience, timing, strategy. That had to be my weapon. I slipped behind a corner, pressing my body flat against the wall, and watched them. Lucas was checking a chart, smiling faintly. Fiona's hand brushed his arm casually, almost flirtatiously. And then I saw it. A moment that made my blood freeze. On the chart, written in sharp, neat letters, was my name. Not just my name, but a set of instructions. My instructions. They had been planning this for weeks, months even, orchestrating each step so I would walk right into their trap. My breath caught, a high-pitched gasp threatening to escape. I pressed my hands to my mouth. My knees trembled, but the spark inside me was now a roaring fire. They thought I was naive. They thought I was blind. But I had seen the setup. I had felt the manipulation. And now it was time. I slid along the wall, close enough to the camera to examine it without being seen. The red light blinked steadily, recording. My mind raced. If I could trick them into thinking I was still paralyzed by fear, I could use the recording to turn their own game against them. I touched my phone, checking the battery and storage. Full, recording. I could pretend I was helpless, but secretly capture every move, every word, every intent. The plan formed quickly, clearly like a lightning strike illuminating the darkness. First, I needed confirmation. Evidence, then leverage, then action. My eyes scanned the hallway, my hands tightening around my phone, and then movement. Dr. Holden Carver stepped out of the operating room again, alone this time. He didn't see me. He paused at the end of the hallway, checking his watch, muttering under his breath about schedules, patients, emergencies. I took a shallow breath. This was it. My first chance. I needed to make it count. Slowly, cautiously, I raised my phone, pretending to fumble, pretending to be caught by the anxiety they believed consumed me. My hands shook, my body quivered, and yet inside I felt a cold, focused calm. My recording began. I pressed the button, capturing every sound, every word. Dr. Carver muttered to himself, oblivious, while I adjusted the camera angle subtly so that if anyone came in behind me, the action could be documented too. My pulse raced, but the plan was unfolding. Then Fiona emerged again, stepping lightly into the hallway. Her heels clicked softly, echoing in the silence. She stopped, glanced at the operating room, and then toward the corner where I was hidden. My heart skipped. She was close. Too close. She looked around, smirked faintly, and returned to the door. My chest heaved. Close call. I adjusted my position, pressing against the wall like a shadow, every nerve on fire. They believed they had me. They believed I was a frightened, trapped, trembling woman. But I had a new role now. Observer, recorder, strategist. And soon, I would be the one controlling the next move. My eyes darted to the operating room door again. It was slightly ajar. I could see Lucas through the crack, calm, smiling faintly. Unaware, or pretending to be unaware, of the storm I carried, I pressed the record button fully, capturing everything. I would not be manipulated. I would not be controlled. And in that moment, crouched in the shadowed hallway, my fear turned into resolve. I was alive, aware, and more dangerous than they could imagine. I crept along the hallway, careful not to let my shadow betray me. Each step calculated, silent, my mind racing faster than my heartbeat. The faint hum of the overhead lights was the only sound, and yet every creak, every breath of wind through the ventilation ducts felt like a shout in my ears. Lucas glanced at the chart again, muttering numbers, times, procedures. I didn't need to understand it fully. I only needed to know that he was immersed, unaware that I was watching, recording, plotting. My hands gripped the phone like a lifeline, my thumbs hovering over the buttons that could seal their fate. I had to remain calm, or even the smallest noise could betray me. Fiona stepped forward suddenly, her eyes scanning the hallway, and I froze, heart slamming against my ribs. Her gaze swept past my hiding place, dangerously close, and she smirked faintly as though sensing my presence. I pressed my back harder against the wall, trying to disappear into the shadows. The cold metal of the fire extinguisher beside me pressed into my shoulder, grounding me. I could see Lucas now stepping toward the supply closet, talking into his earpiece, calling someone, giving instructions. Their hubris was their weakness. They believed they had all the power. I, crouched in darkness, held the unseen advantage, timing, patience, leverage. I reminded myself of the nurse's warning. Hide, trust me. That was all I needed. I waited. Every muscle tensed. The hospital corridor stretched endlessly, a corridor of fear and anticipation. I could feel my pulse in my throat, my ears ringing with every beat of it. Fiona returned to the operating room, leaving Lucas alone. This was my chance. Slowly I stepped out, hands raised slightly as if trembling with anxiety, my body language screaming vulnerability. My phone recording was hidden against my chest, capturing every move. Lucas turned toward me, surprise flickering in his eyes, quickly masked by his usual composure. "You shouldn't be out here," he said smoothly. "It's dangerous. You should go back." His tone was calm, almost casual, but the faint tremor of tension betrayed him. He believed he was still in control. I tilted my head, voice shaking just enough to sell the act. I thought I needed to see him, I stammered, gesturing vaguely toward the operating room. Lucas's brow furrowed. "You mean the patient? It's serious. You can't be here." He took a step toward me. I froze, pretending to sway slightly. Every step he took, every motion was captured by my recording. Every word would be evidence, leverage, ammunition. He had no idea I was documenting him, exposing him. My chest heaved, but I held my voice steady enough to feign weakness. I can't. I have to know. I have to see him," I whispered. The act worked. His expression softened, a mixture of frustration and concern. "I can't let you interfere," he said, though he didn't move to stop me. His eyes darted nervously toward the open door, and I knew he was calculating, realizing the risk but confident in his control. Control. That word burned inside me. I had none of it yet, but I would. I inched closer to the operating room door, keeping my movements slow, deliberate. Lucas followed just enough to keep the illusion of authority. The air smelled of antiseptic, sterile and sharp. My stomach twisted with the reality of being so close. Yet the fear that had once paralyzed me was now tempered by strategy. I peeked into the operating room from the corner of my eye. Machines beeped steadily, monitors flashed, and a bed sat empty. Lucas had anticipated I would be looking for someone, but the setup was incomplete. My pulse quickened. They had thought to manipulate my emotions, make me vulnerable, make me act rashly. Instead, I had patience, observation, and evidence. I needed the perfect moment. I inched further, keeping my back to the wall, pretending to be unsteady. I can't. I just... My voice trailed off. Lucas's eyes flicked toward the hallway, scanning, calculating. He believed he had me. But the recording, the camera, my phone, it was my unseen shield. I clutched it tighter, imagining the shock on his face when the tables turned. And then I saw her. A shadow moving along the far end of the corridor. Another nurse? No. Smaller, wiry, with confidence and determination etched into every movement. The same nurse who had warned me, the one who had whispered, "Hide, trust me." Ayanna. My heart leaped. She nodded slightly, a silent signal. She had been monitoring, watching, waiting for the right moment. And now it had arrived. My plan and hers would converge perfectly. Lucas didn't notice her approach. He was focused entirely on me. I took a shallow breath, heart pounding. Ayanna moved with precision, her steps silent on the tile floor. She carried nothing overtly threatening, but her presence was magnetic, commanding, a force in itself. Lucas glanced toward her just as I tilted my phone to adjust the recording angle, capturing both him and me in the frame. The smile that had once been charming faltered. He sensed something. Something was wrong. His eyes flicked rapidly between us. What are you doing?" he stammered, though he tried to keep his voice controlled. Ayanna's gaze was fixed on him, unwavering. "I think it's time you explain yourself," she said evenly, each word measured. My blood ran cold with excitement. This was it. The moment we would begin to unravel their control piece by piece, with evidence in hand, strategy in mind, and patience as our shield. Lucas's expression hardened. "Explain? Explain what? This is all routine. You don't understand." He stumbled over his words. The lie was unraveling even to him. I stepped closer, holding the phone higher, letting him see it but keeping the recording secret. Ayanna moved to my side, calm, composed, ready. Together, we were no longer the prey. For the first time in hours, maybe days, I felt the surge of power. Lucas had underestimated both of us. Fiona remained unseen, perhaps returning to some other task, perhaps observing. Either way, she had no control. The balance had shifted, and in that instant I knew the next move had to be precise. I spoke softly, deliberately, voice trembling with feigned weakness. I don't understand, but I know something is wrong. I saw the chart, the instructions, everything." My words were carefully chosen. Lucas froze. Ayanna's eyes never left him. "I don't know what you think you're doing, but it ends now," she said, calm, firm. The authority in her voice was unmistakable. I realized then that fear, strategy, evidence, and timing were all aligned. Lucas's confidence cracked, and in that split second, I saw the vulnerability hidden beneath the surface. It was fleeting, but enough. I pressed my advantage, letting my phone catch his every micro-expression, every subtle tell. Ayanna stepped closer, her posture commanding, a silent threat and reassurance at once. "You've manipulated her, tried to use her fear, but we've seen everything," she continued. "Every step, every lie." Lucas's jaw tightened, his composure snapped. Panic flickered across his eyes. "No, this isn't happening," he whispered, almost to himself. I took a step forward, still feigning weakness, but my heart roared. I held the phone higher, letting the angle capture the room, him, every movement. The shift in power was palpable. And then, the moment arrived. A shadow in the doorway. Fiona, realizing the unraveling, stepped in, just enough to witness the confrontation. The air thickened. charged with the tension of a game finally turned against its masters. I glanced at Ayana. She nodded. The unspoken signal passed between us. Our strategy was set. The evidence was being captured. And the next move, the decisive one, was about to unfold. Lucas's eyes widened as the realization hit him. Control was no longer his. The tables had turned. He had planned for manipulation, deception, fear, but he had not accounted for patience, courage, and strategy combined, and I was ready. The storm within me had become an unstoppable force. The culmination of fear transformed into action, observation transformed into leverage, and in that instant, the entire hospital corridor seemed suspended, a breathless pause before the inevitable unraveling. The hum of the fluorescent lights seemed deafening as I held the phone higher, my hands steady despite the storm of adrenaline coursing through me. Lucas's eyes darted around, trying to locate any escape, any leverage, any ally he could call on, but the hallway was empty except for us and Ayana, and the unseen pressure of every recording pixelated in my phone hung over him like a guillotine. You don't understand," he stammered, his voice cracking for the first time, betraying the confidence he had worn like armor. Ayana took a step closer, her presence magnetic, a wall of authority I could hide behind. "I understand perfectly," she said evenly. "You thought this was about control. You thought you could manipulate fear and obedience to your will. But you forgot one thing. You underestimated patience. You underestimated courage. And you certainly underestimated evidence." My heart pounded in my chest as I watched him falter. I adjusted the angle of my phone slightly, capturing the beads of sweat forming on his temple, the micro twitch of his jaw, the tightness in his hands. This was no longer about survival alone. This was about leverage, about turning every trick, every scheme, every lie he had built into a web that now ensnared him. Lucas's breath came faster, shallow, uneven. He glanced over his shoulder, calculating, eyes sharp, trying to detect any hidden threats, but Ayana's steady gaze pinned him in place. I can fix this," he muttered, a desperate attempt at composure, though the words sounded hollow. I tilted my head, voice trembling just enough to sell fear. You fix it? How? You already made mistakes. You hurt so many." I let the words trail, carefully crafting a pattern of guilt and weakness he could not deny. Ayana didn't speak. She let me do the work, silent and lethal, a shadow ready to strike if Lucas tried anything foolish. Every second stretched, each heartbeat echoing in the sterile corridor. Then a faint sound, Fiona's return, the click of her shoes against the tile. Lucas's eyes widened, panic shooting through him. "No, she's..." His sentence broke as he tried to gauge the hallway. I stepped forward slightly, the phone angled to capture the approaching figure. Fiona appeared at the far end, seemingly calm, her hands empty. Lucas's brain raced, trying to calculate threats, alliances, escape routes, but every option crumbled before the evidence building against him. "Stop," he said finally, voice rising, almost a roar. "Stop this! You don't know what you're doing!" Ayana's lips pressed together, but her eyes remained icy, unyielding. "We know exactly what we're doing," she replied. "We've watched, we've recorded, and we've planned. Every lie, every threat, every manipulation. It ends tonight." My chest rose and fell rapidly. The strategy that had taken hours, days, maybe weeks of preparation was converging in this single hallway. Lucas's pupils dilated, the smell of antiseptic and fear mixed in the air, a sharp tang that set my senses on edge. I took another step forward, hands steady, phone raised, recording not just the confrontation, but the unraveling of control he had wielded so carelessly. You can't," he stuttered, trying to regain composure, but every word faltered under the weight of evidence and authority in the room. Fiona moved closer now, her presence a silent assertion of power. She didn't speak. She didn't need to. Lucas's mind raced. Every instinct screamed escape, yet no escape existed. We had constructed a perfect trap using his overconfidence, his arrogance, his assumption that fear and manipulation could contain us. I felt a surge of empowerment. I was no longer merely a frightened wife, racing blindly through hospital corridors. I was calculated, strategic, armed with evidence, and supported by a force he hadn't anticipated. Lucas's hands clenched into fists, trembling. You think you're so smart," he spat, though his voice shook. You don't know what I I tilted the phone toward him, voice soft but firm. I know everything, every secret, every plan, every betrayal. His eyes flicked downward, then back up, assessing, calculating, realizing that every move had been documented. No, he whispered, realization dawning, terror blooming. Ayana stepped closer, her posture silent but commanding, a clear warning. One more reckless move and consequences would come. I could see the fear now, pure and unadulterated. It was intoxicating, not for cruelty, but for justice. Lucas's mind raced, looking for a narrative to save himself. He opened his mouth to speak, but the sound faltered. Fiona, silent observer, moved subtly toward a side corridor, just enough to flank him, a shadow that could intervene in seconds. The balance had shifted entirely. He was no longer the hunter. He was trapped, exposed. I stepped closer, phone raised slightly, recording every subtle tick, every stutter, every failed attempt at control. "It's over," I whispered. Not just to him, but to the fear that had gripped me since the start. "It's finally over." His eyes flickered with desperation, the kind that comes when someone realizes the rules have changed, that control is no longer theirs, that manipulation cannot protect them anymore. I could almost hear the mental gears grinding, trying to calculate, trying to salvage, trying to understand how this trap had sprung. Ayana's gaze never wavered. She was the calm in the storm, the anchor in the chaos. I felt bolstered by her presence, a reminder that strategy, preparation, and courage could overcome even the most meticulous deception. Lucas's voice cracked. You don't understand what's at stake. You have no idea." His words fell flat. We did. We had known every angle, every risk, every potential outcome. His control was an illusion, fragile and transparent, and now it would shatter. I took another step forward, my voice soft but laced with conviction. "We understand everything, every plan, every lie, every threat, every step you took to manipulate and control." Lucas's face paled, and a bead of sweat trickled down his temple. The tension in the corridor was nearly unbearable, the silence punctuated only by the faint beeping of machines from the operating room. His eyes flicked between Ayana and me, searching for some leverage, some argument, some weapon. There was none. I saw him falter, his confidence cracking, the mask of control slipping piece by piece. Fiona moved slightly, a subtle nudge toward the door, closing off any imagined escape route. Lucas's breaths became shallow, rapid, erratic. His hands flexed, then relaxed, then flexed again. Panic surged, raw and primal, replacing arrogance. I felt a strange calm amidst the chaos. Every nerve was alive, every sense heightened, but a quiet confidence settled over me. The trap had worked. The plan had succeeded. Control had shifted entirely, and now the next step, decisive, irreversible, was imminent. Lucas's eyes darted between us, finally settling on the phone. His pupils dilated, the recognition of evidence dawning fully. "No," he whispered again, voice hoarse. Ayana remained silent, her presence commanding. Fiona's shadow lingered, silent, threatening. I stepped forward, phone angled perfectly to capture every subtle shift in his expression, every tremor of fear, every unspoken thought betrayed by his eyes. The power balance was unmistakable. I was no longer the hunted. I was the strategist, the orchestrator, the one with leverage. And I felt the surge of triumph, not just for myself, but for every wrong he had committed, for every manipulation he had wielded against others. Lucas's jaw tightened, a futile attempt at reclaiming composure. I pressed the advantage. "Every word, every motion, everything is recorded. You can't lie, you can't manipulate, you can't escape this." The weight of the statement hung in the corridor, thick and suffocating. Panic flashed across his eyes. He stumbled slightly, instinctively, toward the operating room, seeking refuge, seeking control. But the corridor was closed, the strategy airtight. Fiona's presence cut off any imagined escape. Ayana's gaze held him, and my recording caught it all. The culmination of fear, preparation, patience, courage, and evidence. The perfect storm. Lucas realized, fully, completely, that his plans had failed, that the control he clung to was an illusion, and that the balance of power had irrevocably shifted. He was exposed, vulnerable, and entirely at our mercy. And in that suspended moment, the air thick with tension and anticipation, I knew the next move, decisive and final, was at hand. Lucas's eyes widened as he realized fully that the corridor had become a cage, his every move observed, recorded, and trapped. My pulse raced in sync with his, though mine carried adrenaline and control. His carried desperation and panic. Ayana stepped to the side, letting the silent magnetic weight of her presence anchor me, a shield and a sword all at once. Fiona moved slightly, more confident now, the shadow behind him threatening, a silent assassin waiting for a moment to strike. Lucas's hands flexed, twitching. And I could see him calculating, trying to find some loophole, some escape route, some trick he had stored in years of arrogance. But there was none. Every corner was controlled, every possible ally already neutralized, every option for deceit blocked by the careful orchestration of hours and preparation. You think you've won," he rasped, voice strained, cracking under the weight of fear. You don't understand. The stakes, the consequences." I tilted my head slightly, still holding the phone high, my voice quiet but deadly. "I understand more than you think. Every plan, every lie, every hidden agenda, every manipulation, every single one is recorded. Every threat, every scheme. And now, it ends." His eyes flicked to the phone, to the screen, to the evidence compiled in seconds, yet representing months of preparation. He swallowed, throat dry, and his gaze darted toward the operating room door, as if there might still be refuge there. There wasn't. Fiona's subtle step forward closed that escape. The corridor, the recordings, the two of us, everything was a trap he had never seen coming. You don't know what you're dealing with," he stammered, stepping backward, each movement betraying the panic bubbling beneath the surface. I have connections. I can—" He stopped mid-sentence as Ayana's eyes met his, ice cold and unyielding. "No," she said softly, every word resonating like steel. "No, you cannot. Every option you think you have is gone. Every ally you imagined is neutralized. Every lie you believed would protect you is transparent. You are exposed." I took a deliberate step forward, voice soft but edged with fire. "We've planned every move. We've anticipated every reaction. You are trapped, and now it's time for you to face reality." Lucas's breathing grew heavier, rapid, shallow. Sweat formed on his temples, and I could see the tremor of fear ripple across his body. His eyes darted, searching frantically like a cornered animal looking for a hole in the wall, a weakness in the cage. There was none. I pressed the advantage, moving closer, phone angled to capture every nuance of his panic, every twitch of his hands, every micro-expression of terror. "You wanted control," I whispered, voice steady, carrying a weight of finality. "You wanted obedience. You wanted fear. You thought you could orchestrate everything. But control is an illusion, Lucas, and fear is only temporary. Courage, patience, evidence, they outlast both." His jaw tightened, teeth gritting, trying to regain composure. You think you can humiliate me. You think—" His words shattered against the reality of the corridor, the recording, Ayana's authority, and Fiona's silent presence. He stumbled slightly backward, the first sign of real physical unbalance, a faltering predator realizing the trap has sprung. I moved closer, voice low, almost whispering, but every word carried the weight of inevitability. "We are not here to humiliate you. We are here to reveal the truth. Every threat, every crime, every deceit, every act of control you wielded to harm, to manipulate, to dominate, it is all exposed, and there is nowhere to hide." Lucas's face drained of color. Panic gave way to disbelief. He stared at the phone, at us, at the corridor, at the walls, as if reality itself had shifted around him. The realization hit like ice water. He had been overconfident, arrogant, certain of dominance. That certainty now collapsed into terror. His hands shook visibly, and his breathing became erratic, rapid. Fiona took another subtle step forward, closing the distance between him and any imagined escape route. Lucas's eyes flicked between us frantically, a mental calculation running wild. Every instinct screamed fight, flee, manipulate, but none of the options were viable. I pressed further, voice low, deliberate. "Look at yourself, Lucas. Panic, fear, desperation, these are the only things left to you. You created this world. You orchestrated chaos. You manipulated trust. And now, all of it turns against you. Every scheme, every manipulation, every threat, everything, it comes home. And you have no defense." His breathing grew louder. more erratic. He took a step backward as if retreat might give him some advantage, but the corridor closed in. Every footstep echoed against sterile tile, amplifying his sense of entrapment. Ayana's gaze never wavered. She remained still, unyielding, a perfect counterweight to his frantic energy. Fiona mirrored the subtle posture of readiness, like a silent predator waiting for him to make the first fatal mistake. Lucas's jaw trembled. His hands flexed, then relaxed, then flexed again. The tension in the corridor seemed to pulse, alive, a third participant in this deadly chess match. I felt my own heart pounding, but beneath it a steady calm. Control had shifted. The hunter had become the hunted. The predator had become prey. I pressed forward slightly, phone raised, recording every twitch, every stammer, every flinch. "Do you understand?" I whispered. "Do you finally see what you've created? Your arrogance, your manipulation, your control. They end here. Tonight." Lucas's eyes widened, pupils dilated as comprehension hit fully. The corridor, the recordings, Ayana's authority, Fiona's presence, my own resolve, it all converged into an inescapable trap. He staggered slightly, finally realizing that every move he might have relied on for control, every scheme, every manipulation, every assumed advantage, it was gone. Nothing remained, only exposure, only reality, only inevitable consequence. I saw a flicker of raw panic, then a spark of desperation. He tried one last attempt at regaining power. I can fix this. I can explain. His words fell flat against the reality we had orchestrated. There was no explanation. There was no fix. There was only truth. Evidence. Exposure. Ayana stepped forward subtly, the energy in the corridor shifting. Lucas flinched. I moved closer, voice soft but unwavering. "You've had your chance. Every threat, every manipulation, every secret, every attempt to control, it's over. Now face reality." His eyes darted wildly, seeking some exit, some solution, some chance. There was none. Every instinct screamed fight or flee, but every option was blocked, contained, neutralized. The corridor felt impossibly narrow, impossibly confining. The recordings, the presence, the evidence, they pressed against him like walls closing in. Sweat dripped from his brow, his face pale, hands trembling. I felt a strange calm, every nerve alive, every muscle poised, yet beneath it a serene determination. This was the moment all preparation, all patience, all strategy had led to. Control had shifted completely. He was exposed, vulnerable. The predator reduced to prey. His mind raced, then faltered. The panic grew raw, visceral, pure. I tilted the phone slightly, voice calm but cutting. "No tricks left. No allies remaining. No escape. You are exposed. Every act of control, every manipulation, every secret, it is over. And now you face consequence." Lucas's shoulders sagged slightly, the first real admission of helplessness. His eyes darted, desperate, searching, trying to locate some hidden option, some loophole, some lifeline. There was none. Only us, only truth, only exposure. I felt the shift, the final balance tipping entirely. He was trapped, completely. No plan, no ally, no manipulation, no control. Gone. Only him, only consequence. Only the culmination of everything. Silence stretched across the corridor. Thick, suffocating. Every breath, every heartbeat, every micro-movement charged the air with anticipation. Then Lucas's knees buckled slightly. Panic and exhaustion overtook him and his body trembled. The stark reality had arrived, and with it the end of his perceived dominion. Fiona stepped closer, unspoken authority emanating. Ayana mirrored every movement, silent, watchful, ready. I remained poised, phone angled, capturing every final nuance of exposure and panic. And then, finally, Lucas's voice broke into a whisper. I can't. He faltered, words meaningless, the panic complete. He understood fully. Control was gone, power was gone, manipulation was gone. Only exposure, consequence, and truth remained. I felt a cold calm wash over me. This was it. The moment every plan had been built toward, every detail, every subtle calculation, it converged here. The hunter had become prey. The predator was powerless. And justice, inevitable and precise, was unfolding in real time before me. The hallway outside the operating room seemed to stretch into infinity as I crouched behind the supply cart, my hands trembling, my breath shallow, and the rain still drumming faintly against the glass ceiling of the hospital atrium above. My mind raced uncontrollably, leaping from one terrifying possibility to another. Had I imagined what Nurse Leora had whispered to me? "Hide, trust me, it's a trap." No, the intensity of her eyes, the desperation etched into every line of her face, the way she had shoved me into this dim utility closet. It was real. It had to be real. I pressed my palms to the cold metal lockers around me, trying to steady the tremors shaking my body as the clock on the wall ticked unbearably loud in the silence. Every second stretched into an eternity. Outside, the fluorescent lights of the hallway flickered faintly, like warning signals, and I could almost feel the presence of something malicious lurking beyond those double doors. I tried to recall what had led me here, to this moment where fear and disbelief twisted together in a poisonous knot. Earlier that evening, my husband Marcus had been normal, sitting in the kitchen laughing about something trivial, brushing off my mild complaint about his late-night project. A storm had been brewing for days, but we had ignored it, and now I was about to witness the storm's culmination. My phone vibrated sharply in my pocket. I jumped, nearly knocking over a rolling tray. It was Leora. She whispered rapidly, her voice barely above a hiss. "They're moving him soon. The doors will open. You cannot be seen yet. Remember, you must hide until I say." I nodded to myself, even though she couldn't see me. I was trapped in a nightmare made real. The rain outside intensified, tapping against the skylights in a rhythm that matched the pounding of my heart. I could hear the faint hum of machines somewhere down the corridor, the echoing steps of staff, but no voices, nothing human, only the prelude to what I knew would be a revelation I was not ready to face. The time crawled forward. 10 minutes passed like an age. Then I heard the distinct metallic sound, the sliding of the operating room doors. My breath caught. This was it. My hands clutched my knees, pressing my face into them as though I could make myself invisible. And then I saw him. Marcus. My Marcus. Walking, not lying on a gurney, not weak or bleeding, but walking, dressed in surgical scrubs, as if he were part of the staff rather than the patient. My stomach dropped. The world seemed to tilt. I froze completely, my mind refusing to reconcile the image before me. Leora's voice cut through the haze. "He's fine, not from the accident that was staged, but you must stay hidden." I blinked, disbelief colliding with relief, only to be replaced by a rising tide of horror as I realized what this meant. If the accident was fake, then everything else, the calls, the alarms, the panic, was carefully orchestrated, and I had walked right into it. As Marcus approached, a woman followed him, slender, impeccably dressed, her eyes sharp and calculating. Recognition hit me like ice water. Madeline, Marcus's personal assistant, the woman whose smiles had always seemed just a little too measured, her loyalty ambiguous at every corporate event. My chest constricted. The pieces fell into place. The emergency surgery, the frantic phone calls, the nurse's whispered warnings. It wasn't about him. It was about me. My heart hammered against my ribs as my mind replayed the last weeks. The insurance policy he had pushed me to sign, the late-night meetings, the whispered phone calls behind closed doors, and now the culmination. A trap laid in the very place I had believed to be safest. I wanted to scream, to bolt, but the closet's walls felt like stone, holding me in place. My own pulse was deafening. Then Marcus turned, seemingly addressing Madeline, speaking softly, the words almost lost in the hum of the machines. "Everything is ready. She'll walk straight into it, just as planned." My blood ran cold. He was smiling. Not just smiling, but the calculated, cruel smile of someone who had rehearsed this, who had known exactly how to make me panic, who had treated my fear as part of a performance. I pressed my back against the lockers, fighting the urge to vomit, and then the final confirmation. The surgical mask in his hand dropped to the floor with a deliberate gesture, revealing a face unmarked by any trauma, entirely healthy, entirely dangerous in its intent. My mind screamed at me to do something, anything, but every instinct told me to remain invisible, to trust the only person I had, Leora. Her whisper had been the lifeline, the tether to survival. "Stay hidden, don't be seen, trust me." But my body would not still. My hands twitched. My fingers grazed the locker handle, gripping as if I could anchor myself to reality. I forced my breathing into shallow, controlled bursts. I had to think. I had to plan. The fire alarm hadn't sounded yet. That would come, Leora had said. And then we would move. Until then, I could only watch, powerless, as Marcus and Madeline moved down the hall. I tried to memorize everything, the cadence of his steps, the tilt of her head, the subtle shifts in their expressions. The trap was not just physical, it was psychological, emotional, designed to unravel me before the final act. My eyes darted to the small gap under the door, trying to see what they could not. My mind raced through the contingency plans Leora must have considered, the intricate choreography that had led to this moment. And then it came, the first indication of movement toward me, a faint shuffle in the hallway outside, the echo of shoes on tile. My pulse spiked. Leora was close. I whispered to myself, "Hold it together. Wait for the signal." Seconds passed, each one stretching like hours. The footsteps paused directly outside the door. I held my breath, my hands trembling, my teeth clenched against the rising panic. The doorknob rattled slightly, then a voice, soft, urgent, cut through. "Nia, now, run, but stay calm." Relief and terror collided. I pushed off the lockers and darted into the hall, the polished floor slick under my bare feet from rain I hadn't realized had seeped in with my coat. I froze at the corner, heart hammering, and there he was again, Marcus, pausing mid-step as if sensing movement. I ducked behind a stretcher. My entire body coiled like a spring. Madeline's eyes swept the corridor, sharp, calculating, and I knew that if she even suspected, I would have seconds, maybe less. I forced my breathing to slow, using every ounce of mental discipline to project calm. My legs trembled as I edged toward the stairwell Leora had pointed out. Every step a delicate negotiation with fate, and then the fire alarm erupted, a shrill, piercing cry that seemed to shake the walls themselves. Nurses emerged from every doorway shouting over the wailing alarms. The chaos was immediate. Marcus froze, confusion flickering across his face. Madeline's lips parted in a silent scream, but the distraction was perfect. I bolted toward the stairwell, my coat catching on the doorframe as I tumbled inside, adrenaline surging, every nerve alive. I pressed the button for the basement, the metal door sliding open with a metallic clang that seemed deafening in the echoing stairwell. I descended 2 steps at a time, ignoring the sting of scraped knees, the sharp pain in my palms as I gripped the railing. This was it, the descent into the unknown, the wolf's lair, the culmination of every terror I had imagined. The basement smelled of damp concrete and cleaning chemicals, low ceilings dripping condensation onto the cracked floors. Shadows stretched long in the dim light, the hum of electrical panels vibrating through the walls. I pressed the spare keycard Leora had given me into the service elevator slot, the door clicking open. A wave of relief washed over me, brief and fleeting, before reality struck again. Even here in the supposed sanctuary of shadows and steel, I was still vulnerable. Still a target. And then I saw it. The doors side by side, labeled simply Chief Surgeon and Server Room. Leora had told me the office first, the evidence first. My hands shook as I pushed open the heavy wooden door of Marcus's office. Inside, surprisingly, was a library of luxury. Thick carpets, leather-bound books, expensive coffee, a mahogany desk. I swallowed a lump in my throat. This was the lair of a man who had lived and breathed deception. Every corner curated for appearances, every detail controlled. I rifled through binders as my pulse pounded, and then my eyes landed on the folder labeled only with a thin red sticker. Inside, Marcus's real medical report, optimal health, perfect condition. My stomach dropped further, nausea twisting my guts. Next to it, another folder contained financial documents. Debts, transfers, the skeleton of a fortune built on lies, mismanagement, and hidden agendas. I pulled my phone and started photographing everything, trembling hands forcing focus, each shutter click a small act of defiance. But even as I moved toward the next objective, the server room, the realization hit. The trap was bigger than I thought. Marcus and Madeline had anticipated this. They had left traces for me to follow, calculated every step to lure me into this basement, into the heart of their deception. My breath came in shallow gasps. Sweat dampened my hair against my forehead. I forced my legs forward toward the metal door with the blinking lights. Server room, restricted access. This was it. Here lay the evidence, the real bait, the culmination of the night's terror. I inserted the USB drive Leora had given me into the port. Watching the progress bar climb, each percentage point a heartbeat in sync with my own. The hum of the servers, the flicker of monitors, the shadows shifting across the walls, the faint echo of alarms above. It all coalesced into a terrifying ballet of risk and resolve, and then footsteps. Outside the door, Marcus's voice, sharp and incredulous, floated in. "Check the office. I'll check the servers." My stomach lurched. The door started to turn. I yanked the drive free. My body coiled, ready for the inevitable confrontation. The moment had arrived. I would either walk out of this alive or I would face the nightmare fully unleashed. The fluorescent lights of the corridor flickered as I gripped the edge of the operating room door, my knuckles white with tension. Every heartbeat was a hammer in my chest, every breath shallow and sharp. Nurse Marisol had shoved me behind the storage cart, whispering fiercely, "Hide, it's a trap, trust me." I had no time to question her, no time to protest. I only obeyed, crouching low, pressing my back to the cold metal of the shelving unit, trying to make myself vanish. My mind raced with fragments of what had brought me here. The call, the panic, the screaming monitors, the way my husband's voice had cracked through the phone line in agony. And now, the stillness. That deafening calm that made the hairs on my arms stand on end. I peeked around the corner. The operating room itself was bathed in that sterile, unyielding light that made everything appear unreal. My husband was on the table, but he wasn't just injured. He was surrounded by masks and gowned figures moving like shadows. I froze. My heart lodged in my throat. Was he alive? Or was this scene a setup, something designed to trap me just as Marisol had warned? My stomach twisted as a gloved hand extended over him. The smell of antiseptic burned my nose, acrid and sharp. Every nerve in my body screamed to run, to flee the hospital entirely, but my feet were cemented to the floor. A second nurse stepped forward and my stomach dropped. One of them was my husband's cardiologist, the man who had promised he would do everything possible to keep him alive. My mind spun. Was this a rescue or a performance meant to scare me into compliance? I could see the small display of monitors, the heart rate steady, yet my stomach refused to settle. I knew my husband, the way he grimaced at pain, the way he clenched his fists when he didn't want to alarm me. That clenched fist now rested limply by his side, and my heart shattered further. "Stay hidden?" Marisol hissed from behind me. Her eyes were wide, panic threaded with authority. She had been through the hospital long enough to recognize the signs, to know when someone was manipulating fear and when the danger was real. But as I watched, I realized the danger wasn't just in the room, it was outside it. There were motives, financial incentives, grudges, revenge. Someone had orchestrated this chaos, and I was in the center. My mind flickered to the last time I had seen him laugh, the first time he held my hand in the ICU waiting room, the quiet moments between us before the storm of bills, accidents, and whispered arguments had consumed our lives. And now? He was on the table, a shadow of the man I loved. The door opened slightly and a shadow passed across the threshold. My breath hitched. I forced myself lower, holding onto Marisol's sleeve. "It's him," she whispered, voice trembling. "Don't move." My hands shook as I pressed my fingers into the cold linoleum floor, the texture biting at my skin. Slowly, ever so slowly, I inched forward, eyes locked on him. My husband's eyes flickered, not awake but responsive. Subtle twitches in the eyelid, a slight quiver of the lips. Panic clawed at me. What had they done to him? Was this a medical emergency gone horribly wrong, or was someone using him as bait for something darker? My mind raced back to the flash drives hidden in my bag, the recording I had insisted on making weeks ago, the cryptic messages I had intercepted from his office. All of it pointed to deceit, to manipulation, to a cruelty that I hadn't fully grasped until now. And yet here he was, alive but vulnerable, the center of a storm that I couldn't yet understand. Marisol's hand pressed against my shoulder. 5 seconds, you move in 5, you go at the exact right moment. Otherwise, I swallowed hard, understanding the unsaid threat. Otherwise, I would be trapped just like him, a pawn in a game I hadn't yet learned the rules to. My eyes darted back to him, the tubes, the monitors, the masks. I could see it all. The nurse at the head of the table adjusted a dial on the ventilator, and my chest tightened. I had to do something. But what? I didn't have time to think. I only had time to act. I scanned the room, memorizing positions, breathing patterns, the subtle rhythms of movement. Every second was an eternity. And then it happened. One of the masked figures turned sharply, stepping away from the table. The gap was perfect. Marisol squeezed my hand. "Now." I bolted, my knees pumping, my arms swinging. The room erupted into chaos the instant I emerged from hiding. "Stop her!" someone shouted. My husband's eyes widened, not in fear but recognition. The terror, the confusion, the raw emotion all registered simultaneously. I lunged for the side of the table, ignoring the sharp sting of gloves, the whirring of machines, the shouts around me. He tried to reach out, but the cords restrained him. "It's me!" I cried, voice breaking. "I'm here! I won't let them hurt you!" And then I saw it. The syringe held by one of the surgeons, a glint of malevolence under the fluorescent lights. I froze for half a heartbeat, calculating, analyzing, remembering Marisol's warning. I had seconds to decide. My mind raced to the recordings, the documents hidden in my coat. The evidence that could either save us or condemn us both. And then instinct took over. I swung the contents of my bag with all my strength. The hard metal of my recorder hit the wrist of the would-be attacker. A scream pierced the room, sharp and piercing. My husband flinched, but I pressed forward, voice loud, demanding, unyielding. "Step back! Everyone, step back!" Marisol had emerged from her hiding place, fists clenched, voice like steel. 2 more nurses appeared behind her, forming a human barricade. "No one moves!" she barked. The room paused, the tension crackling like static. My husband's eyes locked onto mine. Something passed between us. Recognition, relief, and a shared understanding. The danger was real, the stakes had never been higher, but we were together. And yet, even as the chaos momentarily subsided, I knew it wasn't over. Someone in that room wanted to control the outcome, wanted to manipulate, wanted to hurt him to get to me. I scanned faces, looking for the faintest twitch, the smallest sign of duplicity. My gaze fell on Dr. Layton, a man I had once trusted with every heartbeat of my husband. His eyes flickered, a micro-expression of panic barely concealed beneath his professional mask. That was the crack, the opportunity. I lunged for the monitors, pressing buttons frantically, overriding settings, sending alarms blaring through the hospital. Red lights flashed, echoing against the walls, and a voice roared over the intercom. "Emergency lockdown in progress. All personnel, hold your positions." Pandemonium erupted. The attackers were frozen, restrained by procedure, protocol, and the unexpected chaos. My husband's body twitched, responding to the sudden adrenaline surge, and I leaned closer, brushing a strand of sweat-soaked hair from his forehead. "We're getting you out," I whispered, my voice trembling but firm. Marisol guided me to a side corridor I hadn't noticed before, the emergency exit routes she had memorized from years of experience. Each step echoed like thunder in my ears. "We have minutes, maybe seconds," she hissed. "Follow me exactly." I nodded, my gaze never leaving my husband, whose eyes followed mine with a mixture of fear, pain, and gratitude. The corridor twisted, a labyrinth of sterile walls, and I felt the weight of every second pressing down. I could hear the chaos behind us, the shouts, the alarms, the frantic scramble of those trying to contain the emergency, and then we burst into the stairwell, cool air hitting us like a bomb. Marisol gripped my hand. "Down these steps, quick but careful, don't stop." I held my husband, supporting his weight, and descended as fast as possible, every fiber of my body on alert. At the bottom, a security team was waiting. Faces grim but determined, they swept in, forming a protective barrier as we moved toward the ambulance parked in the back emergency exit. My heart raced. Every shadow, every figure in the periphery could be a threat. But Marisol's hand was steady on mine, guiding, protecting, commanding. We reached the ambulance. Medics quickly took over, lifting my husband onto a stretcher, checking vitals, stabilizing, preparing for transport. I watched, helpless and furious, as they whisked him into the vehicle. The doors closed and the engine roared to life. I gripped the side, pressing my forehead against the cool glass. I had survived the trap. I had navigated the chaos. I had reached him. But the storm was not yet over. As the ambulance disappeared around the corner, I turned back toward the hospital. Dr. Layton and his accomplices were still inside, still dangerous, still determined. My heart clenched with rage. I had seen the truth now, the betrayal, the danger, the stakes, and I knew one thing for certain. They had underestimated me, and they would pay for it. The hospital lights flickered one last time as I backed away from the emergency exit, my mind racing with plans, contingencies, and strategies. I had evidence, allies, and a will forged in fire. I was no longer the frightened wife. I was the storm incarnate. And the moment I stepped into the night, the cool wind on my face, the world outside seemed different, sharper, more alive, and mine to reclaim, The trap had failed. The hunters were now the prey, and I, standing in the darkness, knew the game was only beginning. I'm really glad you're here, and that I could share my story with you. If you liked it, show me by liking the video and subscribing to my channel. Let's see how many of us there are. Write in the comments which city you're watching from and what time it is. I'm so curious to know where all you wonderful people are tuning in from. If you want to support me a little extra, you can also send a small donation. I share new life stories for you every single day. And now, 2 of my most popular stories will pop up on the screen so you can choose what to watch next.